I shouldn't even be telling you this. Honestly, I've avoided talking about that night for years because every time I go back to it, even just in my mind, my chest tightens like someone's got a fist wrapped around my ribs. But maybe it's time to finally get it out. Maybe I owe it to myself. Or maybe I just want someone else to understand how close I came to disappearing. Because there's one detail everyone forgets when they fantasize about the deep web. Sometimes you don't go looking for trouble. Sometimes trouble finds you. And that's exactly what happened the night I accidentally accessed a server I was never supposed to see. You know those stories where a hacker stumbles into some secret government system, or hacks a corporation's vault, or uncovers a conspiracy. Those stories always start with someone bragging about how skilled they are. But this one doesn't. Because that night didn't start with brilliance. It started with boredom. Pure, stupid boredom. I remember the glow of my monitors filling my room, the faint hum of the cooling fans, the stale smell of cold coffee that had been sitting there for hours. I wasn't even trying to crack anything big. Just poking around hidden directories, checking abandoned nodes, scanning for anything unusual. I'd spent weeks on a project that had gone nowhere. Some encrypted messaging chain that turned out to be just a private board for people chatting about weapon mods. Nothing interesting. So that night, I wanted something different. Something with teeth. I fired up my tools, bounced my connection through 6 dead-end VPS hops, then rerouted through 3 compromised routers someone had left vulnerable with default credentials. Nothing special. Nothing that should have led to what came next, and yet even now I can trace every step, every keystroke. It's burned into me, like muscle memory laced with fear. I ran a recursive scan on a cluster of onion services that hadn't responded for months. Normally, that means they're dead nodes. But this time, one answered. No banner, no metadata, just a timestamp, current. That was the first thing that made me sit up straight. I pinged it. The response time was shockingly low, like local low. At first I thought something was wrong with my routing, but everything checked out. So I tried something simple, a directory enumeration. I expected nothing. Maybe a generic login, maybe a blank page. But instead the server pushed back. Not a rejection, not an error, a handshake. A handshake I didn't initiate. My heart punched my ribs so hard I froze. That's not normal behavior. No private server welcomes you in, especially not one buried behind layers of hidden addressing. I stared at my screen for a full 30 seconds, wondering if I'd just pinged myself through some weird loop. But then the first message appeared. A single line, white text on a black screen. Why are you here? No username, no prompt, no formatting, no port change. It just appeared inside the terminal window like something was typing directly into my machine. I didn't type anything. I didn't breathe. I killed the terminal. It reopened by itself. Why are you here? I yanked my Ethernet cable out so fast the connector cracked. But the text stayed. Even though I was offline. Let that sink in. Offline. And the text didn't disappear. Now I know what you're thinking. Malware, right? Remote shell, compromised system, maybe even a rat. But here's the thing. I run my machines clean, paranoid clean. Every session isolated, every instance sandboxed. Nothing persistent, nothing cached. And yet there it was. I forced a hard reboot. When the machine powered on, the terminal popped back up with the same question. Why are you here? This time I cracked. I typed something, even though my fingers were shaking so hard I misspelled the first word. Looking. Didn't mean to access anything. Just scanning. The reply came instantly. You weren't supposed to see this. Most people would have shut the system down and walked away. But that's the curse of people like me. We want to understand. And fear doesn't kill curiosity for us. It magnifies it. I stared at the line for a long time before typing back. What is this server? 3 dots blinked, then vanished, then blinked again, like someone or something was thinking. A place you should forget. That wasn't an answer, and it was also the first time I realized that whoever was behind this wasn't just a sysadmin. They were watching, actively watching. I typed again. Who are you? This time the response took longer. A full minute, maybe more. Long enough for my heartbeat to control my breathing. Finally, we don't use names here. That phrasing bothered me, not I don't use names. We, plural, organized, trained. My stomach nodded. At that moment, a folder structure revealed itself on my screen. I didn't click anything. I didn't even touch the mouse. The directories opened themselves, branching down like veins spreading beneath skin. Observation, collection, subjects, disposition, pending. My mouth went dry. I don't scare easily, but something about those folder names made my skin tighten around me like it didn't fit anymore. Against every instinct telling me not to, I clicked on Subjects. It opened. There was no list, no index, no files, just a mirror image of my desktop background. At first I didn't understand. I just stared at it, confused. But then the image flickered, and the timestamp updated. It was live. It was my webcam, even though my webcam was covered with tape. I ripped the tape off. The lens was still physically blocked, but the image on the screen didn't care. It was showing me real time. Sitting there, staring, with my hands curled around my keyboard like claws. My body locked, a pressure built in my chest, like I'd stepped into a vacuum. I tried to exit. The terminal froze. My keyboard died. My mouse died. Every input died. And then another message appeared. Do not touch anything. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. But eventually the server began streaming data to me. Not files, not images, logs. Cold, clinical logs. Each line was a profile. Not of criminals, not of corporations. Of ordinary people, thousands of them. Detailed, categorized, watched, tracked. I scrolled through 2, maybe 3 entries before I regretted looking at any. Movement patterns, purchase histories, calls intercepted, messages archived, deep web posts linked, social media scraped, psychological indexes, behavioral predictions, disposition tags, some marked neutral, some marked observe, some marked contain, one marked remove. I stopped breathing. My brain felt like it was trying to crawl out the back of my skull. This wasn't surveillance like you hear in conspiracy circles. This was something else, something bigger, something colder, something built to operate without questions or conscience. I reached for my PC tower, ready to yank the power cord out of the wall. But before I could touch it, a new message appeared. If you disconnect, you will be classified. That stopped me. Dead. My hand hovered over the plug, trembling. I don't think I've ever felt so trapped. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't even anger, just protocol, mechanical, like a reminder. My throat tightened. What do you want? I typed. The answer didn't come immediately. For a moment I thought maybe they were deciding. Maybe they were watching me through a dozen angles, waiting to see if I'd try something stupid. When the reply finally came, it felt worse than if they'd threatened me. Compliance. Compliance with what? They didn't explain, they didn't warn, they didn't negotiate. The directory structure closed on its own. The terminal wiped itself clean. Then a new single file appeared on my desktop, a TXT file, named with my own username. I clicked it. Inside were 4 lines. We know who you are. We know where you are. You did not see this. Forget the server. My hands went numb. For the first time in years, I felt real fear. Raw, primal fear. The kind that makes you think about how fragile your existence really is. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every passing car felt like it slowed down near my apartment. Every shadow seemed sharper. But the worst part wasn't the fear of being watched. It was not knowing what I'd stumbled into. Not knowing who or what was behind that server. Not knowing whether I'd been marked, logged, or placed under one of those labels. And by dawn, something else happened. Something worse. The file disappeared, not deleted, vanished. The entire desktop reset. Logs cleared, history wiped, every trace of the encounter removed as if my machine had never been touched. Except for the fact that I remembered everything. And the webcam light. It stayed on. I covered it again with tape. It didn't turn off. That's when I realized something horrifying. They hadn't been trying to keep me away from the server. They were testing what I'd do after seeing it. They were watching my reaction, evaluating me, and that was only the beginning. I thought about destroying my entire setup, wiping every drive, physically smashing the hardware. Hell, I even considered leaving my apartment and never coming back. But fear clouds judgment and paranoia twists your options into illusions. Because the truth was, none of that would have mattered. They already had access. They already had what they needed. And hiding from something that had clearly existed long before I ever found it was pointless. Still, I wasn't going to just sit there. The first thing I did was shut off every machine in the room. Not a graceful shutdown, straight power kill. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I forced myself to disconnect every cable. I pulled the routers, pulled the power strips, pulled everything until the room was quiet and dead. But the silence didn't help. I sat in that dark room for hours, trying to convince myself that maybe this wasn't as big as I thought. Maybe it was some elaborate honeypot. Maybe it was run by a group trying to scare off intruders. Maybe it was some black market intelligence pipeline I'd stumbled into accidentally. But deep down, I knew the truth. No underground group had that level of access. No government honeypot would have responded the way that server did. And nothing should have been able to control my machine offline. That left only one explanation. That server wasn't just hidden. It was protected by something not bound by the rules I understood. Something that wanted me to see just enough to realize I shouldn't have looked. I kept replaying the folder names in my head. Observation collection subjects, disposition pending. Every one of those names was cold, systematic. And the way the profiles were organized, that wasn't a hit list. It wasn't surveillance, it wasn't espionage. It was monitoring, curating, managing. Everything about it felt like it existed for one purpose: classification. By the afternoon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I needed answers, even if they scared me. So I packed my laptop, left my apartment, and went to the only place I trusted when I needed isolation. The basement of an old co-working space that still had Ethernet jacks in the walls. No Wi-Fi, no cameras, no windows. It wasn't perfect, but it gave me the illusion of control. I hooked up a backup machine, one that hadn't been powered on in months. One with no prior connections, no personal data, and no stored credentials. A clean slate. Or so I hoped. The boot was smooth. No surprises. I isolated the system, set a firewall around every packet, layered a virtual environment, then locked the machine behind a hypervisor. Overkill for most things. But I wasn't taking any chances. Then I tried to retrace my steps. I rebuilt the exact scan path I'd done the night before. Same tools, same routing, same chain. I followed everything perfectly, down to the exact timing intervals. But this time, nothing responded. No server handshake, no directory tree, no message, just dead nodes, empty hops. Silence. Like the whole thing had never existed. I tried again. Nothing. I pushed deeper, scanning for any anomaly remotely close to the signature I'd seen. I broadened the range, brute-forced hidden directories, sniffed for patterns, anything that could hint at the server's footprint. Still nothing. It was like the server had evaporated. But servers don't vanish. Addresses don't just unexist. Even dead nodes leave behind echoes, residue, something. But this cluster was clean, too clean, and that's when I realized something chilling. They hadn't removed the server. They'd removed me from being able to see it. While I was thinking that, the terminal blinked. For a second, I thought it was just a refresh, but no. Something was typing. Slow, deliberate. Like whoever was on the other side wanted me to feel every second between each character. We said forget. My whole body locked. I hadn't connected to anything yet. I wasn't even scanning at that moment. I pulled my hands away from the keyboard. "How are you still connected?" I typed, even though my throat felt tight. The reply came, "You're not the one connected." I felt my stomach drop. There are statements you don't forget. That was one of them. What the hell did that even mean? I typed, "What do you want from me?" The response, "Your silence." I stared at the screen. The temperature in the basement felt colder. My fingers were numb. Silence. They wanted me to pretend none of this ever happened, to go back to my life like everything was normal. I typed, "If you don't want to be seen, why let me see the server last night?" Then came the longest pause yet. I could almost feel something thinking on the other end, calculating, judging. Finally, "We didn't let you." No explanation, just that. I tried asking again. "What was that server for? Who are you?" No answer. I waited. Still nothing. I reached for the laptop power button, planning to shut the whole thing down, but the terminal flickered back to life with a final message. "This is your last warning." The cursor blinked. No more text appeared. No more directories forced themselves open. No more surveillance windows popped up. Just that message, hanging there like a sentence that didn't need punctuation. I closed the laptop, and that's when I heard something from upstairs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, controlled. Not the sound of someone just walking through a co-working space. Not the sound of someone pacing or talking. These footsteps were deliberate. One step, a pause, another step, a pause. Someone was checking the rooms. I knew instantly they weren't casual footsteps. They weren't the building staff. They weren't anyone who would be there at that hour. They were searching for me. I killed the lights in the basement and pressed my back against the wall. I held my laptop like a weapon, even though it wouldn't do a damn thing. I listened. The footsteps got closer and closer. They passed the door above me, stopped. Then, the doorknob turned. I held my breath so long my chest burned. The door didn't open. The handle twitched. Then, nothing. Silence. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. But eventually the footsteps moved again, farther, away from the basement toward the exit. Then the sound stopped completely. I didn't go back upstairs. I stayed hidden for almost an hour, waiting, praying they'd left. When I finally emerged, the whole building was silent, empty, like no one had ever been there, but someone had, and they weren't looking for a restroom. I left the co-working space. I didn't run. I was too scared to make noise, but I walked fast enough that my legs shook. I kept checking every reflection I passed, every window, every car that slowed near me, every face. By the time I got home, I was mentally shredded. When I walked into my apartment, something felt wrong. Couldn't explain it at first. Nothing looked moved. Nothing felt different. But the air did. It felt touched. I checked my machines, all unplugged, all untouched. But when I turned around to check my closet, I saw it. A small sticky note. On my chair. Yellow. Handwritten. I hadn't left it there. I knew I hadn't. And the handwriting wasn't mine. 4 words. This was your final. No signature, no symbol, no explanation. Just that. That's when the panic finally broke me. I tore apart my apartment. Checked every corner, every lock, every vent, but nothing. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no cameras planted. Whoever left that note had been in my apartment, and they'd been confident enough to leave a message without worrying about whether I'd find it. That's when I got it. The server hadn't been the threat. It had been the test. They wanted to know my reaction. They wanted to classify me. And now they had. The next morning, the webcam light finally turned off. Not because they had stopped watching, but because they didn't need to watch anymore. I stayed offline for weeks. I destroyed half my equipment, moved apartments, changed numbers. I even considered leaving the country, but nothing, not once, showed any sign they were still tracking me. In fact, it was the opposite. It was like I'd ceased to matter. And maybe that's what saved me. Because from that day on, I followed their instruction, stayed silent, I stopped digging. I stopped chasing the server. But the truth? I never forgot it. And every time I hear that faint electric buzz in a dark room, or see a webcam light blink unexpectedly, or pass a stranger who lingers 1 second too long, I wonder if I was really meant to survive seeing that server, or if I was just classified as something they didn't consider worth cleaning up. And the thought that terrifies me most isn't that they're still out there. It's that maybe I was never supposed to know they existed at all. Thank you for staying until the end. Really, not everybody does. You listen to something I've kept buried for way too long. If you want more confessions like this, more real stories from the deep web, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who likes this kind of content. Stay safe out there, and keep your eyes open.